Okay, this one is quite new. This is about less than 100 years ago. But it's kind of important and interesting for, I guess, for Chinese history, particularly for Chinese people. So this is qianmu, who wrote 国史大纲. It's like a summary of the history of our nation, saying that, okay, so this is the forward. Okay, for those who read this book, please first have the following ideas. First one, you should believe that the citizen of any nation, especially those claimed to be having knowledge above average, you must have understanding of the past of the nation. Otherwise, you're only at most a person with knowledge, not someone who is a knowledgeable citizen. Secondly, what I mean about knowing your history is that you must also have a sentiment and respect for the history of your nation. Otherwise, it would be just knowing some foreign history you don't care. Next, what I mean by having sentiment and respect for the nation's history is that you would at least not hold the view that all the things in the past were empty and meaningless, and that all the troubles and mistakes we have now were from previous people, that we are standing at the highest point of history, and whatever doesn't work out was their fault. This would be a contempt towards your own culture. Lastly, when a nation has citizens mostly acquiring those conditions, then the development of the nation forward has hope. This was written around the time of the Second World War. So, when the Japanese invasion concerned him that maybe the nation and the culture would be gone. And he was writing this to tell the people. Now, let's look at China. So this is a very rough map that basically I drew, but of course it's not really accurate where the rivers are. And that's the point, because the rivers were changing. Next one. Civilization, of course, that usually happen where water is easily available. There are different archaeological sites which we can find, and these are only the more famous ones. And especially the ones, there's the ones around the Yellow River, Huanghe. The river is named yellow because it has so much mud and sand inside. It's yellow. And there's the Long River. The river is so long that the name is Long River. The different sections has different names. So for English speakers, you're probably more familiar with the name 𝐤𝐬𝐧𝐿. And that shows basically only a few of them. If we look at the next slide. So you can find more detailed maps, and if you search those names, you can find more details about what they have in the in the cave. And here is a brief view of China in the ancient time. And you might ask why it looks like this. There is an area named Zhongyuan, or loosely was referred to as Zhongyuan, the central plain. And they view the people outside to be barbarians, basically, right? So in each direction, so in the south, Man, and west, Rong, east, Yi, and in the north, Di. So the different clans in different directions, they each have different names referring to them. So here you see the example that Chinese people in the old time, they're also used to using nouns in only one character, which is sort of in contrast to now. We tend to have a lot of names in 2 or 3 characters. Okay, and why is that the people have this view that the other people are just barbarians or they don't matter? Especially when you see that we have multiple sites showing there were civilizations all over the place, right? Because, of course, everyone would consider themselves to be the most important. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so here is a timeline of Chinese history. You often hear that Chinese history is about like 5,000 years. And this is like a common saying that has been said all over the place. If you look at the timeline, in fact, it will be about 4,600 to 700. It's a rounded number. And this section is actually legend. So that there is no clear correspondence with archaeology or any other finding, especially when there was no preserved writing. We can only say these are the things we have heard, from before. And these people are basically legends. Now, if we look at the names of the periods, you have the 3 dynasties, 3代, 夏商周, and then the unification happened in Qing dynasty over here. Then the Han dynasty, the longest period in Chinese history. Then 魏晋南北朝, this is like a name loosely referring to the really complicated period where China was split, basically, and then unified again in Sui, and then Tang dynasty, which most people know, and then 五代十国. Then again, unification into Song, but then China is split into north and south. Then Yuan, which is the Mongols, and Ming, Qing, which is ruled by Manchus. When I was small, in school, we were required to memorize this sequence somehow. Now, there are different variations, slightly, that how you memorize these things. But what you can see is basically it has a line. It's like a linear narrative. And so this brings back the question about the Central Plain, because these are the people who developed writing first. So they had the clearest records. And also, in the course of history, although they started to conquer the neighbors or get mixed with other people, the concept of China and also the space of China expanded gradually, but they had always remained the more central people. Of course, in their records and in their perspective, they have been always self-centered. And this is why China was considered to have started in this central plain, like the central place of the world. And that's why this is the way we see it, that there is only one line that passed down from the ancient time to now. Because all the other ones, or most of them, either have not been recorded or they were sort of neglected. But this is also what people, not only what people believe, but what people want to believe. Because it means that we have one period and the next dynasty would basically take over the legacies of the ancestors and say, now we take China. And therefore, there's this line, which is the narrative that you basically identify with. This is China, and we came from this source. All right, so as I said, there's the period really long ago that was not really certain. And then there's the time which we know to be using bronze. And then in the warring periods, people started using iron tools, especially in farming and weapons. And then there's the famous Three Kingdoms and the North and South dynasties. There are two periods, especially when China was ruled by basically northern nomads, big empires, however. And it's around this time that the rough shape of the modern border of China took shape. So it basically, including the western parts, now you see in the modern map of China. Yeah. All right, so there are a lot of events and important things, including basically, exploring the West region, which later on became the heavily used Silk Road for some time. And receiving Buddhism from India and producing paper, making carved printing, and later on movable printing, figuring out how to use explosive, building the old Great Wall and the new Great Wall, and there's also a lot of interaction with the neighbors. The travel to the West, as known by the title of the novel, and cultural exchange with Japan, how China influenced Japan in the Tang Dynasty was really interesting, and also the development of foreign religions in China, and interaction with Tibet and then Arabs, and paper making was taken to the West by Arabs. And we will look at this, more times in the later classes. So now we can go ahead and